Welcome back, man. This is the final one of the series. We went from fasting boosting metabolic rate to GLP-1s, fiber, and type 2 diabetes reversals. And honestly, it flips the whole just eat less story on its head. Okay, that part about a fasting not lowering basal metabolic rate. What the hell? I love the audacity. It went up during the fast. That is like telling a bodybuilder your muscle burns more while starving. But I need to understand the mechanism, not just the vibe. He framed it as insulin dropping and sympathetic tone rising. Fight or flight getting turned on, so you're activated, not sluggish. I mean, the wolf analogy was insane, but also kind of makes sense. A hungry wolf is dangerous. A fed lion is basically a couch mascot. The bigger claim is diets that cut calories too hard can slow you down hormonally. And the calories in, calories out crowd acts like that's not even part of the story. So he's basically saying fasting changes the instructions your body receives. Not magic appetite control, but biology is writing your program. Then the breakfast thing. Breakfast as evidence we're supposed to fast. That naming argument is funny, but I want the actual data behind it. Like, break fast sounds poetic, but does it pay rent? The calorie difference claim, breakfast eaters averaging 539 extra calories, was loud. And even if that number varies, the concept is consistent. More eating windows usually means more calories. But I'm also thinking people eat breakfast and still lose weight, right? So it's not breakfast equals fat, it's frequency changes behavior and hormones. Exactly. He keeps pulling it back to the feedback loops. And then he casually drops, "There are no rules for fasting." That line made me nervous because people love to turn no rules into chaos. But he did give baselines, 12 to 14 hours as just the starting point. Like 14 hours is baseline not after dinner, but 16 or 24 hours changes the game. He's basically saying don't cosplay fasting, actually extend the fasting period. Cosplay fasting is the perfect phrase for half the internet. Then there was the really spicy point. Hunger isn't just time since you ate. It's hormonally mediated, like most people are hungriest around 8 p.m. and least hungry around 8 a.m. because morning hormone surges prep you. So the morning "I'm starving" feeling is not as universal as Instagram suggests. Okay, but where he really gets everyone mad is the GLP-1 segment. He said Ozempic works mostly by reducing appetite, not burning calories, which annoys people who want the world to stay simple and measurable. But here's my pushback. Appetite reduction is still behavior change leading to caloric deficit. Yeah, but he's arguing it's deeper than deficit. It's hunger control as the root cause. He framed food as instructions to hormones, and GLP-1 as one instruction to stop eating. So GLP-1 rises after eating, crosses into the brain, and helps shut down the keep going signal. That brain signaling detail made it feel less like magic and more like control systems. Control systems is such a nicer way to say our brains are thermostats. Still, I worry people will treat GLP-1s like a cheat code instead of learning the biology. And the episode kept hammering. If you don't understand the hormones, you'll keep blaming willpower. Then the fiber argument was wild. Processed carbs without fiber cause insulin spikes. The cocaine comparison, he really went there. He basically said fiber smooths the insulin rise, so dopamine cravings don't hit as hard. That's a coherent story. Speed of absorption changes the hormone sequence, not just calories. And he's implying calories isn't the only axis, it's the timing and form of nutrients. But I'm going to be annoying. Isn't it still possible that total energy matters? Like, I agree with the root cause talk, but thermodynamics doesn't retire. He actually admitted calories in, calories out is correct. Just shallow if you don't ask why you ate. That Titanic hit an iceberg analogy was basically the mic drop. Eat less icebergs is a hilarious way to describe superficial advice. Then the protein discussion. Protein doesn't store energy the same way, and pure protein is unnatural. In nature, you never find whey powder is also oddly comforting. I'm not fully sold on the protein is inefficient framing, but the point about processing is fair. He's pushing a whole reduce processing, reduce insulin instruction frequency approach. And juice fasting, he called it not a real fast if sugar stays high. I mean, if you're drinking sugar water, congratulations, you're just eating quietly. Then comes autophagy, the cellular cleanup process, and that's where it gets poetic again. He said fasting can break down old organelles and junk protein, rejuvenation vibes. He tied it to growth hormone rising and then building new proteins after eating again. But do you buy the religions knew this angle? I love the argument, but I also love the caution. Humans can stumble onto a practice without knowing the mechanism. Still, the consistency, periodic fasting across cultures makes it hard to dismiss. And he gave an evolutionary story. Survival during winter, more activation, use fat stores. Also, when sick, you stop eating to lock down glucose because bacteria love it. That one is compelling even if biology is always messier than one-sentence explanations. Okay, but the real closer topic was type 2 diabetes reversal. He claimed diet changes can put people into drug-free remission for a large chunk. We should be careful with percentages, but the direction, diet first, does feel overdue. His framing was brutal. Treating a dietary disease with drugs without fixing the diet is like patching the ceiling while ignoring the leak. Also, he basically asked, why don't systems adopt it faster? Answer, incentives, reputation lock-in, and doctors trained on the old model. That calories framework becomes a career moat, not just a theory. Meanwhile, patients get blamed, stigmatized, and told they just need more willpower. The episode connected it back to cortisol, kindness, gratitude, community, lower stress, better metabolic outcomes. I actually like that because it makes it feel humane, not just mechanistic. The vibe was, compassion is not fluffy, it's physiology adjacent. And that's the theme of the whole series, right? Root causes, not blame. All right, that's it from us on these episodes. Thanks for riding the hormone roller coaster with us. We'll see you in the next series. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep questioning the shallow answers. Welcome back. This is the final ride. We're wrapping the hormone storyline. We dug into why fasting can raise metabolic rate and how hormones drive hunger and weight. The whole exercise doesn't melt fat vibe is so counterintuitive it's almost rude. But honestly, the argument is that your body adapts, so the math gets weird fast. Like, if you fast and your calorie burn actually goes up, then what are we even doing counting? Calories in, calories out is correct, in the way astrology is technically a system. Exactly. And the deeper point is that the outside isn't passive. It's instructed by hormones. When insulin drops during fasting, your body stops treating storage like the default mode. And then sympathetic tone and cortisol and growth hormone show up like, okay, activate. I love the wolf analogy. Hungry wolf is not lethargic, it's dangerous and focused. So the fear that fasting slows metabolism is basically the opposite of what the physiology suggests. But people still insist it's simple energy conservation, like we're batteries with feelings. And that's where the food as instruction frame is a cheat code for understanding hunger. If food reliably triggers storage hormones, then you're not just eating, you're programming behavior. That's why breakfast becomes symbolic, too. Break fast basically admits we're meant to cycle. The English language is low-key doing nutritional therapy in plain sight. The idea is feed, then fast, so you actually get a window where your body can burn. And the nutrition advice to eat immediately after waking keeps insulin humming all day. Meanwhile, the metabolic flexibility crowd is screaming quietly in the corner. What got me was how fasting isn't treated like magic, just like using biology's existing pathways. Like 12 to 14 hours is baseline, but if you want real changes, you might need 16, 24, or more. Still, I hate how people talk about fasting like there's one rule book for every human. Right, no rules for fasting sounds reckless until you realize it's about adapting timing. The point is to shrink the eating window, sometimes make it 2 meals, sometimes 1. And then hunger becomes a hormonal clock, not just, I missed food, therefore I'm ravenous. The claim that people are least hungry at 8 a.m. and most hungry at 8 p.m. is wild, though. That's basically saying hunger is prepared by cortisol and growth hormone rhythms when you wake up. So your body is like, relax, breakfast will handle itself for once. And that leads straight into GLP-1s, because appetite drugs are basically hormone mimicry. The more I hear about GLP-1, the more it makes weight loss feel less like willpower and more like signaling. Ozempic doesn't burn calories. True, it just turns down the hunger volume knob. But I also worry people treat it like a cheat code and forget the behavioral context. Still, as a concept, it supports the thesis. Hormones govern intake, and intake governs weight. That homeostatic feedback loop line, eat, triggered GLP-1, then the body tells you to stop. Which is hilarious because we pretend dieting is negotiating with yourself when it's actually negotiating with biology. And the calorie count crowd gets offended because they want the model to be purely arithmetic. Calories are the Titanic iceberg story, technically true, but not the real cause. The real cause is going too fast, meaning physiology and environment, not just arithmetic restraint. Also, processing matters, because refined carbs cause a spike that feels like a dopamine fireworks show. Fiber slows absorption, blunts the glucose spike, and changes the downstream hormonal instructions. But I always hear people reduce it to just eat more fiber, and that can miss the bigger hormonal frame. Like protein, people think it's automatically weight loss friendly, but the body stores energy differently. Protein isn't a primary storage form. Carbs become glucose for storage, fats become fat for storage. So the body is weirdly efficient at turning some inputs into stored energy, and less so with others. And then people try juice fasting and wonder why it doesn't behave like a true fast. Because juice still carries sugar, so insulin can still roar, which kills the point of the mechanism. The autophagy part is where it gets almost cinematic, cellular cleanup when fasting removes protein and signals scarcity. Your body breaks down subcellular organs sounds terrifying until you realize it's renovation, not demolition. The idea is older junk gets recycled, and then when you eat again, growth hormone helps rebuild. I like the evolutionary angle too. Winter, scarcity, you don't shut down, you activate and switch fuel. That's such a better story than humans invented diets to punish themselves. Scheiß. It also reframes sickness fasting. When you stop eating, glucose drops because microbes prefer it. Though I want people to be careful because the biology can support fasting, not encourage reckless extremes. Right, like the timeline for autophagy, 20 to 30 hours estimate, depends on protein intake and metabolism. Also, every religion already had fasting built in, which is either coincidence or ancient empirical wisdom. If millions of humans keep showing up for the same practice, you can't just dismiss it as nonsense. The most promising part to me was type 2 diabetes reversal, remission through dietary change and intermittent fasting. The headline claim was that a big chunk of people can reach drug-free remission by cutting carbs or using fasting. And then the question becomes, why don't systems push this harder if it's free-ish and scalable? Inertia, career incentives, and we built our worldview on calories is the least shocking explanation. Doctors calling it a fad when it's been around for thousands of years is peak cognitive dissonance. The deeper injustice is blaming individuals for something rooted in biology and environment. That's why connecting it to cortisol, stress, gratitude, and community matters. It's compassion plus physiology. When you lower stress, you're not just being nice, you're changing hormonal states that affect appetite. So weight loss isn't a moral test. It's a system-level response you can actually influence. Have more willpower is the shallow answer, like counting icebergs instead of speed. This series has been about root causes and how hormones sit right underneath everything we feel. All right, wrap-up mode. This episode really turned the lights on for me. If you remember one thing, fasting and food timing are instructions, not just deprivation. And if you remember two things, also remember carbs and processing drive spikes you can't discipline away. Thanks for riding the hormone roller coaster with us through this series. We'll see you in the next series. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep questioning the shallow answers. Welcome back, man. Last time we promised root causes, and this one delivered hard. We went from fasting changing metabolic rate to GLP-1 appetite hormones to why C-CO can feel too shallow. And the big vibe shift was, food isn't just calories, it's instructions for your body. The episode basically said, stop blaming people, start interrogating the physiology. Wait, that basal metabolic rate point, did you catch how it didn't drop during fasting? Yeah, I was expecting the your metabolism slows trope to win instantly. But then the argument was basically, if you drop metabolic rate, you die. So why would biology do that? The fasting activating explanation. Insulin down, sympathetic tone up, cortisol and growth hormone up. I love when something feels counterintuitive and then turns out the hormone math makes it make sense. Still, though, like, study design matters, right? You can't just take one graph and crown it. True, but the physiology claim is first-year medical stuff. Hormones drive energy mobilization. Also, the wolf analogy, hungry wolf is more dangerous than lion that just ate, wildly memorable. And the punchline was, if you're trying to lose weight, dropping metabolic rate is death, basically. That reframed dieting from punishment to programming, like teach the system a new behavior. Which is a rude awakening, because most diets are just vibes plus suffering. Then the whole breakfast rant. Breakfast literally admits we should fast daily. I didn't expect a linguistics argument to hit harder than half my nutrition takes. But okay, 12 to 14 hours is baseline, so if someone fasts 12 hours and expects miracles, that's not it. The idea was more timing compression like 16 hours or a 24-hour rhythm changes the lever you're pulling. There are no rules, for fasting is such a dangerous phrase, people will weaponize it. Yeah, like someone hears that and thinks, cool, I'll just stop eating forever. But the deeper point wasn't suffer, it was your body already has stored fuel for a reason. And I liked how it connected to hunger being hormonally mediated. Most hungry at 8 p.m., least at 8 a.m. So your I'm just naturally hungry narrative is basically wrong, at least in timing. That's why early morning feels weirdly doable, even if you've eaten nothing. Meanwhile, everyone out here acting like breakfast is medicine handed down by the gods of cereals. Then we pivoted to GLP-1s, Ozempic and the whole class, appetite suppression as the main mechanism. It's hilarious because the calories aren't the problem crowd finally gets a drug that agrees with them. Yet I'm cautious. Appetite reduction can create weight loss, sure, but outcomes and side effects matter. Absolutely. And the episode's argument was more conceptual. It proves hunger is upstream from intake. So GLP-1 rises after eating, feeds a feedback loop, reaches the brain, tells you to stop. Homeostasis in action. The hormone that tells you to stop eating even though you haven't eaten is so cleanly weird. And then the eating slower might help line, like letting the feedback have time to work. But also, if you're a speed eater with no patience, the takeaway is at least you'll think twice. Then fiber, processed food, removing fiber, slowing digestion, blunting the insulin rise. The episode basically said, remove fiber, you create an unnatural spike, then your brain thinks, this is amazing. That cocaine comparison was bold, but the serotonin-dopamine vibe explanation made the point memorable. Dopamine-driven craving from refined carbs is one of those uncomfortable truths people don't want in their food aisle. And it wasn't carbs are evil, it was processing changes the kinetics, like speed of glucose absorption. That's such a different lens, same macro label, different hormonal instructions. Still, fiber debates can get overconfident. People act like fiber alone solves obesity. For me, it was less one magical nutrient and more stop treating meals like identical input-output machines. And protein. He basically said protein isn't bad, but the world sells processed protein products like whey powder. Like you can't just find 100% pure protein in nature. Sorry, gym bros. There was also the storage mechanism idea. Your body stores glucose and fat. Protein isn't really the same storage pathway. So when insulin rises, you're nudged toward storage. When you fast, insulin drops and storage signals quiet down. Then autophagy popped in. Fasting as cellular cleanup, growth hormone up, old junk broken down. I loved the organelles line because it forces you to picture what's happening beneath the skin. The bathroom renovation analogy was so absurd it somehow worked perfectly. And the religious angle, periodic fasting as ancient human experimentation, not just superstition. Which makes you ask, were they ahead, or were they just observing consistent benefits over generations? Either way, fasting as break and rebuild is a story that matches the biology we now can describe. And then we close with the type 2 diabetes reversal angle. Diet as the root cause, not a calories-only symptom model. I get why people demand more data, but the remission with carbs reduction or intermittent fasting theme is powerful. Also, it frames why systems resist change. If your whole career is built on a shallow model, new information threatens your identity. Doctors calling it a fad while it's been around for thousands of years is the most hilarious contradiction ever. That calories in, calories out view can be correct in thermodynamics, but wrong in causality. Exactly. Thermodynamics is the what, but hormones explain the why you overeat. The Titanic analogy was brutal. Iceberg is the object. Speed is the actual failure mechanism. Counting icebergs is not a strategy. It's just selective attention to feel in control. And we ended up on compassion and cortisol, how stress, loneliness, resentment can mess with metabolic health. It's wild how the be kind to yourself advice quietly matches endocrine reality. Like gratitude as a metabolic intervention? Sure, why not? Biology loves context. And the series takeaway is basically this. Blame isn't a solution, understanding is. All right, wrap-up mode. This episode really turned the lights on for me. If you remember one thing, fasting and food timing are instructions, not just deprivation. And if you remember two things, also remember carbs and processing drive spikes you can't discipline away. Thanks for riding the hormone roller coaster with us through this series. We'll see you in the next series. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep questioning the shallow answers. Welcome back. Last time we teased it, now we're landing the real mechanism. We went deep on fasting, hormone feedback loops, and why sicko can feel shallow. The wild part is how not eating can increase metabolism instead of lowering it. Wait, so basal burn stays the same or even rises during a fast? Yeah, and that flips the whole dieting logic that says restriction slows you down. It's like the body hears food's gone and goes into activation mode. Not lethargic wolf energy, more like fight-or-flight wolf energy. Imagine trying to lose weight by making yourself less energetic. That's comedy. But physiologically, fasting changes insulin, cortisol, sympathetic tone, growth hormone. So the body stops treating you like a storage unit and starts pulling from stored fuel. And that's why the dropping metabolic rate story feels upside down. I can already hear trainers saying, just burn more. But exercise doesn't always solve the hunger instructions you're living under. Like you can run a marathon and still be eating like a gremlin. The episode's core vibe was, food is information, not just calories. That instruction framing is sneaky, because it makes hormones the runtime. And then breakfast becomes this myth people treat like a rule, not a choice. Breakfast literally means you break your fast. English is the evidence. It's so on the nose, feed then fast, then break it again. So the claim is early morning eating can inflate intake because you eat more often. Plus, more meals means more chances for insulin-driven storage signals to fire. And people act like hunger is purely willpower. That's the frustrating part. Hunger is hormonally mediated, not a moral failing clock you can reset. Like studies show, people are least hungry in the morning and peak at night. Which is wild, because it means you're not failing at breakfast. You're aligned with physiology. Your body is literally scheduling cravings for the time you can't monetize them. The hormone surge in the morning is basically preparing your day without demanding food first. So fasting windows like 12-14 hours are baseline, but maybe not strong enough. Right, if you're only doing a tiny after-dinner to breakfast gap, you might be barely poking the system. The bigger play is 16 hours or 24 hours or time-restricted eating like 12 to 6. And then the extreme version, multi-day fasting, sounds intense without context. But the point is, if your body has stored fuel, it can mobilize it efficiently. Let your body eat your body fat is a sentence that makes people recoil. And yet it's probably the whole job the fat is paid to do. That's also why juice fasting gets called out. Sugar keeps refeeding signals alive. If you're drinking a bunch of sugar, it's not fasting, it's just dieting with a straw. But very low sugar juices could be fine nutritionally, just not the same mechanism. Then autophagy enters the chat like the plot twist of cellular recycling. It's like your body starts cleaning up subcellular junk when protein and nutrients drop. And protein intake can stop autophagy, at least conceptually, by interrupting the signal. So a 24-hour fast might not be for everyone, but longer fasts can increase the window. Nobody knows exactly when autophagy kicks in, but estimates float around 20-30 hours. So basically, science is precise, but the timing is still messy. Love that honesty. And then the connection to religion, periodic fasting as ancient biology experiments. The argument was, people weren't just being spiritual, they were cycling hormones and behavior. Grandparents' wellness wasn't a skincare routine. It was fasting plus community. Community lowers cortisol, lowers stress load, reduces the chaos that pushes people toward eating. That also means compassion and gratitude aren't woo. They may reduce stress hormones. But I'll push back. Stress is one factor, not the entire switchboard. True, but the episode wasn't saying only be grateful. It was saying look deeper than blame. That blame isn't a solution line hits because the calorie framework often punishes people. Like, you're weak is the lazy diagnosis, when the underlying signals are louder. This is where processed food becomes central. Spikes in glucose and insulin drive cravings. And fiber acts like an antidote by slowing absorption, smoothing the insulin and dopamine response. The cocaine analogy for refined carbs is extreme, but it illustrates the big hit effect. Yeah, it's a bit metaphorical, but the point is dopamine learning your palate. Protein isn't treated like a magic weight loss potion either. It's just another input. Plus, protein storage is not the same as storing glucose or fat, so the eat protein endlessly logic wobbles. But fast forward to GLP-1 drugs, those reduce appetite, proving hunger is causal. Exactly. If weight loss happens without burning calories, then appetite and hormones are the lever. The drugs are basically hormone messaging cheats, not calorie-burning machines. And GLP-1 is released from the gut in response to eating, then signals the brain to stop. So the episode's whole spine is feedback loops. Eat, hormones, behavior, energy storage. It's like SECO is first-order thinking, and hormones are second-order thinking. The Titanic iceberg analogy was perfect, honestly. Hitting icebergs is obvious, but going too fast is the deeper cause you can actually change. So for type 2 diabetes, the dietary disease framing makes sense. Drugs alone won't fix root signals. The most promising claim was remission via carb reduction and intermittent fasting, potentially drug-free. Still, we'd want careful personalization and medical supervision, especially for meds. Of course, but the episode's frustration is systems and incentives move slower than evidence. Doctors have careers built on calories and guilt, so changing the story threatens the whole foundation. And people get stuck repeating the same moral verdict instead of updating the model. I love that the conclusion keeps returning to food as instruction, fasting as signal tuning. That's the series' takeaway. Understand first, blame last, or never at all. And if anyone needs a bumper sticker, carbs and processing spikes are harder to discipline away. We're ending this 2-episode run feeling like we got the lights turned on. For now, thanks for riding the hormone roller coaster with us. See you in the next series. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep questioning the shallow answers.